Walmart made billions of dollars this year, far more than expected. In Walmart in China, they should, as I said, eat the tariff.
Walmart has always been more than a store. It's been a symbol of affordability, of rural resilience, and of the American promise that scale could bring savings to every family. Its slogan, "Everyday low prices," wasn't just a marketing phrase. It was a national mantra. But in 2025, that promise began to fracture. Quietly but unmistakably, the price tag started changing. Not just incrementally, but dramatically. A Barbie doll that had cost $10.49 one week suddenly jumped to $14.99 the next. Bananas, diapers, and infant formula, long considered untouchable staples, followed the same trajectory. The cause wasn't corporate greed. It was something far more systemic. The trigger? A sweeping set of tariffs reinstated by President Donald Trump targeting Chinese imports, with rates that initially soared to an eye-watering 145% on key categories before settling at a still brutal 30%. These weren't symbolic penalties. They were economy-altering decisions. And while policymakers framed them as moves to protect American industry, retailers like Walmart were forced to do the math. And the math didn't lie. Real quick, if you're into videos that cut through the noise and break things down clearly, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps more people find this. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's a good time. We've got more deep dives coming your way. Also, drop a comment and let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your take. Now onto the video. Enter John David Rainey, Walmart's CFO. He wasn't known for dramatic press briefings, but his tone in early June was unusually somber. Consumers, he warned, would begin feeling the pinch immediately. By July, the full weight of those tariffs would hit, right as families across America began preparing for back-to-school shopping. It wasn't just about toys anymore. It was backpacks, pencils, lunchboxes. And for millions of households already juggling inflation, rent hikes, and rising gas prices, it was the final straw. But the crisis went deeper than sticker shock. For a company like Walmart, whose competitive advantage was built on razor-thin margins and aggressive price control, being forced to raise prices wasn't merely an economic inconvenience. It was an existential threat. The entire Walmart identity was collapsing in real time, and the ripple effect extended far beyond Bentonville, Arkansas. Other retailers watched nervously. Target, Costco, even regional grocery chains, they all took their cues from Walmart's pricing decisions. When Walmart blinks, the entire industry flinches. And when Walmart points to tariffs as the reason for raising prices, the rest of America takes notice. The backlash was immediate and emotional. Parents flooded social media with screenshots of grocery receipts that had ballooned overnight. "I used to budget $150 a week. Now it's $200 and I'm buying less," one user wrote on Twitter. News anchors ran side-by-side comparisons of pre- and post-tariff prices. Economists began issuing warnings about a retail inflation spiral. Even conservative talk show hosts, normally supportive of Trump's protectionist agenda, began questioning whether the tariffs had gone too far. President Trump responded swiftly, taking to his Truth Social platform to lambast Walmart. "They should absorb the tariffs like real American companies," he posted. But economists quickly pushed back. Tariffs, they reminded the public, are taxes. Someone always pays. And if it's not Walmart, it's the consumer. Behind the scenes, the conversation was even more urgent. Internal memos circulated among Walmart executives showed projections that these pricing changes weren't temporary. Unless tariffs were repealed or negotiated down, this new economic reality would persist and possibly worsen. More importantly, these weren't isolated issues. Pricing was only the first phase. What came next would be far more transformative. Sourcing changes, automation acceleration, and a geopolitical repositioning that would see Walmart quietly withdrawing from long-standing American manufacturing relationships. But that's getting ahead of the story. For now, what mattered was this. Everyday low prices, the cornerstone of Walmart's identity, had cracked. And in that crack, a deeper truth emerged. The American middle class wasn't just being squeezed, it was being redefined. Retail wasn't just a business model, it was a battlefield. And Walmart had just fired the first shot. While headlines focused on rising prices and sticker shock, the real revolution at Walmart was happening far away from its storefronts. It wasn't plastered on banners or splashed across ads. It happened silently, behind warehouses, inside procurement offices, across freight terminals. Walmart wasn't just reacting to tariffs, it was rebuilding its entire sourcing model. And in doing so, it sent a message to American manufacturers. Loyalty has limits. For decades, Walmart had trumpeted its Made in America campaigns. It partnered with small manufacturers from Arkansas to Pennsylvania, offering them massive contracts that promised growth, stability, and nationwide reach. These businesses had hired based on Walmart's projections, expanded their operations, and built their entire infrastructure around serving the retail giant. Then came the silence. One by one, orders stopped. Contracts weren't renewed. Inquiries were met with vague responses. The reason was never stated outright, but industry insiders knew the truth. The 30% import tariffs had rewritten the rules of the game, and Walmart was already redrawing its global supply chain. It started with small shifts. Packaging materials began to change. Fiberglass replacing aluminum, lighter plastics replacing heavier composites, all aimed at dodging specific duties. Then came origin labels. Products that once proudly bore Made in the USA began arriving with generic foreign markings. Behind the curtain, Walmart's sourcing teams were aggressively shifting procurement to overseas partners, Vietnam, India, and especially Mexico. In Vietnam, factories that once serviced European buyers suddenly found themselves flooded with Walmart contracts. In India, textile hubs ramped up production as U.S. orders surged. In Mexico, nearshoring became more than a buzzword. It became a new lifeline. Tariff-exempt under regional trade deals, these supply routes gave Walmart the cost advantages it needed to stay competitive. Domestically, the fallout was brutal. Small manufacturers, blindsided and outmaneuvered, saw years of partnership vanish overnight. There were no public statements, no apologies, just a sudden disappearance of opportunity. In towns like Youngstown, Ohio, and Little Rock, Arkansas, factory floors that once buzzed with activity grew quiet. Owners scrambled to find new buyers. Some turned to e-commerce, others shut down entirely. And yet, Walmart's pivot wasn't just economic. It was symbolic. The company that had once positioned itself as a champion of American manufacturing had rewritten the rules. The new priority wasn't patriotic optics, it was survival. Whoever could weather a 30% duty and still deliver on time would win Walmart's business. Geographic loyalty had been replaced by economic pragmatism. This quiet exodus sent shockwaves through the retail and logistics world. If Walmart was pulling out, others would follow. Suppliers, freight companies, and competitors began reevaluating their own sourcing maps. The ripple effects extended to trucking routes, warehouse demand, and even port traffic projections. The American manufacturing sector, already hollowed out by decades of offshoring, had just lost one of its few remaining champions. But for Walmart executives, the move wasn't about betrayal, it was strategy. With tariffs rewriting the rules of engagement, they needed flexibility, speed, and margin recovery. The old map was no longer viable. A new one was taking shape. And this was only the beginning. Walmart's pricing crisis was phase 1. The sourcing pivot was phase 2. But what came next reshaped the very nature of labor inside America's largest employer. Faced with rising costs, political pressure, and logistical chaos, Walmart made a move that would ignite a firestorm across both sides of the political aisle. It turned to machines. It began quietly. Autonomous floor scrubbers appeared in dozens of stores, gliding silently down aisles. Shelf-scanning robots roamed late at night, beaming data back to centralized systems. Self-checkout lanes, once a side option, became the default. Employees were told it was innovation, but many saw it differently, as a signal that humans were becoming obsolete. Behind the scenes, the transformation was even more aggressive. Artificial intelligence tools were rolled out to manage inventory forecasting, supplier ordering, and delivery routing. Algorithms replaced planning departments. Machine learning models were tasked with anticipating consumer behavior, price sensitivity, and supply disruption. What had once been handled by mid-level managers and floor associates was now managed by code. Walmart didn't frame this as a cost-cutting measure. Publicly, it touted the move as a future-facing innovation strategy. But internally, executives were candid. One leaked document revealed the brutal truth. Automation doesn't pay tariffs. Machines don't take sick days. Algorithms don't join unions. Labor unions reacted with fury. Conservative lawmakers called the move unpatriotic, accusing Walmart of abandoning its workforce. Progressive critics warned of job loss on a scale the country hadn't prepared for. Yet Walmart stood firm. They didn't have a choice. They had a survival imperative. In cities like Memphis, Tennessee, and Lincoln, Nebraska, where Walmart warehouses served as major employers, the consequences were immediate. Overnight, entire shifts were restructured. Employees who once managed pick and pack lines were reassigned, laid off, or offered retraining for technical roles. But not everyone could transition. Many lacked the digital fluency or transportation access needed to switch careers. Local economies trembled. Schools, churches, gas stations, all dependent on Walmart paychecks, they felt the sting. Unemployment claims spiked. Small towns reliant on Walmart for both retail access and stable jobs began to unravel. Ironically, Walmart's push for automation triggered the very community breakdown it had long been praised for preventing. The company had once been the glue holding together rural towns with limited economic options. Now, it was the spark that ignited uncertainty. And yet, in boardrooms, the math couldn't be ignored. Automation restored predictability. It allowed cost reductions amid supply volatility. It eliminated the risk of labor strikes. And in a tariff-fueled environment, every cost saved mattered. What began as an experiment became the new norm. Stores that had once employed 300 workers now operated with fewer than 150. Warehouses went dark, lit only by robot arms and blinking servers. The retail giant was no longer just a store, it was becoming a machine. The cultural shift was undeniable. The brand that once stood for rural grit and working-class reliability now represented something colder, more efficient, and infinitely more controversial. But Walmart didn't slow down. Because this wasn't just about automation, it was about the next step in survival, deconstructing the supply system that had powered American retail for over half a century. Walmart's logistics empire was once considered a modern marvel, an intricate ballet of trucks, containers, and software that moved goods across 5,000 stores and hundreds of distribution centers with near-perfect efficiency. It had been perfected over decades, down to the minute. But then, the math broke. President Trump's tariff spike didn't just affect product prices, it wrecked the very system Walmart relied on to function. Overnight, inbound shipping costs from Asia ballooned. The cost of unloading a container that once took $3,000 soared to over $8,000. Port fees rose, fuel surcharges tripled. Even the cost of warehouse labor fluctuated due to ripple effects in the broader economy. Walmart's entire logistics model, based on just-in-time inventory and cross-docking efficiency, collapsed under the pressure. Facilities that once operated on razor-thin margins now ran at a loss. Every incoming container meant bleeding red ink. And it wasn't an accounting issue, it was survival math. Inside the company's Bentonville headquarters, emergency meetings were called. Logistics heads, procurement officers, and financial planners pored over spreadsheets and real-time dashboards. They ran scenario models. They recalculated regional freight differentials. What they saw was alarming. Certain distribution centers in heartland states were hemorrhaging money. These weren't minor hiccups. These were fundamental failures. Cross-docking, the process of unloading freight from one truck and immediately loading it into another, was no longer viable. Inventory flow slowed. Backlogs grew. Warehouse space filled faster than it could be cleared. And the worst part? No amount of optimization could fix the core issue. Tariffs had introduced a fixed cost that made the current system unsustainable. So the decision came. Quietly and without much warning, Walmart began suspending operations at several logistics hubs. Elk Grove, California. Bowling Green, Kentucky. Mid-sized fulfillment centers in Ohio and Indiana. Staff were informed via internal memos. Local governments were caught off guard. The closures weren't political statements. they were survival decisions. And for Walmart, they marked a grim turning point. The company that once promised to be everywhere was now disappearing from the places that needed it most.
But numbers told only half the story. Behind those spreadsheets were tens of thousands of workers, forklift drivers, inventory checkers, cafeteria staff, small-town trucking firms that relied on Walmart contracts. All of them were about to be pulled into a storm they didn't see coming. What had started as a tariff war in Washington had now become a logistical implosion in Middle America. And Walmart, once hailed as the most resilient company in U.S. retail, was now learning what happens when even the strongest systems meet immovable pressure. But this was just the first wave. The fallout hadn't even begun. To outsiders, the closure of a Walmart warehouse might look like a simple business decision, a line item on a balance sheet, an unfortunate but necessary adjustment. But in dozens of American towns, it was something else entirely. It was an earthquake. In places like Jefferson City, Missouri, and Bowling Green, Kentucky, Walmart was more than a big box store. It was the economic engine of the community. For many small towns across the Midwest and the South, Walmart was often the largest employer, the biggest donor to local events, and the unofficial hub of daily life. When one of its distribution centers or regional warehouses shut down, it wasn't just jobs that disappeared, it was the rhythm of the town itself. There were no dramatic press releases or nationwide announcements. For workers, the news came through scheduling systems. Shifts suddenly vanished. Logins were disabled. Phone lines went unanswered. By the time some employees realized what was happening, their jobs were already gone. Cafeteria staff found their kitchens shuttered. Forklift operators showed up to padlocked gates. Small trucking firms saw delivery contracts evaporate with no official explanation. Local mayors scrambled to respond. Emergency town halls were convened in churches, high school gyms, even parking lots. State employment agencies were overwhelmed with unemployment claims. In some areas, churches and barber shops became makeshift crisis centers, offering resume writing help and mental health support. For many families, the emotional toll was just as heavy as the financial one. Generations had worked at the same facilities, fathers training sons, mothers mentoring daughters. Now, they faced an uncertain future with no severance and no backup plan. A father of 3 in Arkansas told a local news station, "We gave our loyalty to this place, and it was taken from us in a blink." The shockwaves extended beyond employees. Small businesses that had grown around Walmart's operations, fuel stations, diners, logistics subcontractors, packaging suppliers, lost their anchor clients overnight. Schools noticed drops in student attendance as families relocated or dealt with housing insecurity. Town budgets were suddenly squeezed as tax revenues dipped and public services strained under new demands.
And all of this occurred quietly, almost surgically. There were no headlines about mass layoffs. But the scale was massive. Estimates suggested that in just 4 months, Walmart's restructuring directly affected over 37,000 jobs across 12 states, not counting indirect impacts on supporting businesses. Meanwhile, Walmart's stock price remained stable, buoyed by its cost-saving measures and aggressive automation pivot. To Wall Street, the decisions were sound strategy. But to Main Street, it felt like betrayal. This wasn't just another case of corporate downsizing. This was the collapse of a social contract. For decades, Walmart had promised stability in exchange for scale. Communities had welcomed it, supported it, and relied on it. Now, they were learning the harshest lesson of globalized capitalism. When systems break, it's the smallest towns that bleed first. But while America was reckoning with domestic job loss, the global picture was shifting even faster. A new trade war was escalating, not just between countries, but between economic philosophies. And Walmart was caught right in the crosshairs. As the United States doubled down on its aggressive tariff regime, the rest of the world responded in kind. America's trade partners, once cooperative, even deferential, were no longer willing to absorb the economic damage, and their retaliation was swift, targeted, and strategic. The European Union imposed counter duties on key American exports, including apparel and processed food, categories where Walmart was heavily exposed. Canada, long considered a close trade partner, increased handling fees on cross-border shipments and added new restrictions on U.S. origin goods. Mexico, which had benefited from nearshoring efforts, added friction by reevaluating tax incentives and reclassifying import categories to incur extra processing costs. Walmart was suddenly navigating a minefield. The international supply chain it had spent decades refining, optimizing routes, negotiating bulk freight deals, and building deep supplier relationships was unraveling. Contracts were renegotiated, shipping costs rose, delivery times stretched, and all of this came as the company was still grappling with backlash at home. At the same time, a quiet but significant shift was unfolding in Southeast Asia. Nations like Vietnam, Thailand, and Indonesia saw opportunity in America's trade war chaos. Their governments moved quickly, offering tax holidays, expedited customs processing, and even infrastructure grants to lure Walmart's business. And it worked. Walmart fast-tracked procurement agreements in these countries. Logistics teams were deployed to Ho Chi Minh City and Jakarta. Visa offices were overwhelmed with requests from Walmart procurement reps and contractors. In just months, new trade corridors were mapped, bypassing West Coast ports and instead routing shipments through the Panama Canal and Gulf shipping lanes.
The message was clear. Walmart was no longer reliant on traditional U.S. trade routes or legacy partners. It was building a new global map, one that prioritized political stability and economic incentives over history or loyalty. Meanwhile, countries like Colombia and Kenya began receiving exploratory visits from Walmart executives. The company was now testing partnerships in regions previously considered too volatile for large-scale sourcing. The draw? Incentives, speed, and fewer political entanglements. For decades, Walmart had worked closely with U.S. regulators and trade officials to ensure compliance and strategic alignment. Now, that relationship was cooling. As the company reoriented its supply chain around more stable international partners, Washington found itself sidelined. And this wasn't just a business pivot, it was a geopolitical signal. America's largest retailer was effectively voting with its supply chain, choosing regions that offered predictability over patriotism. At the same time, inside the Beltway, frustration turned to fury. Lawmakers were asking, if Walmart wouldn't help weather the storm of tariffs, who would? But as Walmart's executives saw it, the real question was, why should we sacrifice survival for a system that's breaking itself? The clash between economic realism and political ideology was about to reach its boiling point, and it would unfold not in backrooms or border crossings, but on live television under the hot lights of congressional hearings. By the time Walmart's global pivot became undeniable, Washington could no longer ignore it. What had started as a quiet corporate restructuring now sat squarely in the center of a political firestorm. And at the heart of that storm was a single, uncomfortable question. Was Walmart abandoning America, or was it simply the first to admit that the old system had failed? President Trump didn't wait for the answer. On Truth Social, he slammed the company with a string of furious posts. Unpatriotic, weak, should pay the tariffs like real Americans. The message was unmistakable. Walmart, in Trump's view, had betrayed the country. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick echoed the sentiment in a nationally televised address. Corporate America must carry the burden of preserving our economic sovereignty, he declared. When the going gets tough, real companies stand by their country. But inside Walmart's boardroom, the tone was far more calculated. Executives prepared for the backlash with spreadsheets, market forecasts, and contingency plans. When invited to testify before Congress, CEO Doug McMillon appeared calm and confident. We're not saving profits, he told lawmakers. We're saving Walmart itself. The hearing quickly turned into a spectacle. Senators demanded answers. Was the company laying off American workers to protect foreign suppliers? Was it manipulating public sentiment to shield itself from political heat? Was this strategic reinvention or simply opportunism in a time of national crisis?
Macmillan didn't flinch. He outlined the math. The tariffs, he explained, were not policy tools. They were fixed costs that had broken the efficiency engine of retail. We've absorbed what we can, he said, but there's a limit, and we reached it. Some lawmakers remained skeptical, but others, particularly from states hit hardest by Walmart's closures, began to see the complexity. One congresswoman from Ohio noted, if even Walmart can't make this system work, maybe it's not just a Walmart problem. Meanwhile, public trust in the company wavered. Shareholders grew nervous. Loyalty card usage declined. And yet, for all the drama, Walmart's trajectory remained steady. The company was not folding. It was transforming. Fast. What no one fully understood yet was that Walmart's next move would go beyond price tags, beyond trade routes, beyond politics. It was building a system that didn't just survive disruption, it predicted it. And in doing so, it was quietly reshaping the future of global commerce. In the midst of political attacks, supply chain collapses, and global sourcing upheaval, Walmart did something unexpected. It pivoted to something that didn't require diplomacy, loyalty, or ideology. It turned to code.
Behind the scenes, Walmart launched a massive, company-wide initiative to develop what insiders began calling its real-time global intelligence platform. This wasn't about sales forecasting or loyalty programs. This was about survival, using data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence to do what no human executive team could: predict the future. The stakes were enormous. Every missaid signal, every unanticipated tariff, every late shipment meant millions of dollars lost. So Walmart did what few traditional retailers had the infrastructure or boldness to do. It went full throttle into predictive logistics. The system's purpose was threefold: anticipate global trade volatility, like tariffs or sanctions, adjust sourcing routes and inventory allocations in real time, optimize costs, and maintain availability before the disruption even reached the store floor. The platform integrated natural language processing to scan government statements, diplomatic meetings, economic summits, and leaked trade memos. If an official hinted at a tariff change, the system flagged it. If port activity in Manila slowed due to typhoons, the system rerouted shipping to Jakarta. If global oil prices ticked upward, the system suggested lighter freight packaging to reduce per-unit fuel consumption.
In one particularly dramatic episode, a surprise tariff announcement was issued on Friday at 4 p.m., just as many retail teams were heading into the weekend. But Walmart's AI had detected suspicious phrasing during a Wednesday press conference and automatically triggered alerts to reroute $120 million in goods away from a soon-to-be tariff-impacted Chinese port. The decision saved the company $14 million in surcharges within 48 hours. This wasn't a science project, it was wargaming at a corporate scale. But Walmart didn't stop there. Engineers added modules to forecast supplier instability, detect regional labor unrest, and even scan satellite data for weather patterns affecting crops or shipping lanes. Algorithms didn't just track what was happening, they learned from it, identifying patterns in competitor behavior, flagging risk-prone inventory types, and adjusting procurement plans days or even weeks in advance. The company went from being reactive, responding to crisis after crisis, to proactive, outmaneuvering competitors and governments alike. And while politicians were still giving speeches about tariffs, Walmart was already adjusting its global logistics flows in the background. But even the best software couldn't fix one thing: perception. For the average consumer, none of this technology mattered if their grocery bill kept going up. For lawmakers, no machine could erase the sting of job losses. Walmart needed a public pivot, one that would reshape not just what it sold, but how people saw it. And that's when it made its boldest move yet, stepping into the spotlight not as a retail titan, but as a reformer. Walmart didn't collapse, it adapted. What began as a crisis, sparked by tariffs, inflation, and global uncertainty, became a radical transformation that rewrote the very rules of retail. From collapsing supply chains and mass layoffs to predictive AI systems and decentralized logistics, Walmart turned pressure into progress. But this wasn't just about saving one company. It was a blueprint for how modern corporations survive in an age of chaos. Walmart didn't just cut costs. It built a system designed to thrive under stress, pivot with policy, and evolve ahead of disruption. And in doing so, it forced an uncomfortable truth into the spotlight. The old way of doing things, cheap labor, centralized warehouses, predictable trade, is gone. What replaces it will be faster, smarter, and colder. The question now isn't whether Walmart made the right move. The question is whether America will evolve with it or fight a battle against a future that's already here. So what do you think? Is this the beginning of a new kind of economy or the unraveling of something we once believed was unshakable? Once again, thanks for watching this video. If you got something out of this, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next one. And hey, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Agree, disagree, or something in between. I'd love to hear it.